Thank you. I was so honored when Emily asked me to do this because I feel like women, we are at a place, a pivotal place in our nation's history when it comes to women, the Me Too movement, women taking power back, women demanding better pay, equality, and I feel like we are on the cusp of something greater and getting to the next level. So I was very honored to be here. I have been a reporter 20 years in Dallas in April. 20 years at WFAA. 30 years in the business in October. And so I have seen and done a lot. I have covered many, many, many things from sports to the Dallas Police Department, which is my beat right now. And people always ask me, is it difficult covering a male-dominated beat? Well, when I first got to Channel 8, almost all the reporters were men. There were very few female reporters in the field. I mean, we had Gloria Campos, and there was some diversity. We had John McKay, but there weren't a lot of women, and they certainly didn't have beats like the police department. And so I remember one male reporter telling me, well, you know what, you're never going to get anything. You're not going to break any scoops. You're not going to break any stories because men will only talk. Those police officers are only, it's a good old boys club. They're only going to talk to men, other men. So you might as well just give it up. Well, I have been blessed to break some of the biggest stories in DPD history over the years, and won 3 Emmy Awards, a National Murrow Award for our coverage of domestic violence issues, changed the way DPD responded to domestic violence after a very critical call. And so I have been blessed that they were wrong.
Congratulations.
So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing panel, and I am up here with some really wonderful, great women. Arcilia Acosta, she is the CEO of Arcilia Acosta. I apologize.
Okay.
CEO of Carcon Industries. Carcon. Okay, well look, I got it all wrong here. Carcon, you got it. Okay, Acosta, she serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer for the company, specializing in commercial, institutional, and transportation design and build of construction. She is the founder of Southwestern Testing Laboratories, Chief Executive Officer and President. She serves on so many boards, including the Greater Dallas Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. You've also been with the Texas Association of Mexican Chambers of Commerce, Mexican American Chambers of Commerce. So you've got a very great resume here, and we're very honored to have you. Malinda Gaul is a partner with Gaul and Dumont in San Antonio, Life Fellow, Texas Bar Association, won many, many awards, fellow for the College of Labor and Employment Lawyers. She focuses a lot on labor law and is, again, very distinguished here on our panel. Vana Hammond, Community Relations, GrowSouth Dallas, for the Office of Dallas Mayor, Mike Rawlings. She's very instrumental in helping bring businesses and empower the people of South Dallas to take back their communities. And as we know, when we want to change things in communities that have long been impoverished, one of the best ways is to bring businesses and bring about change and give people opportunities. And she has been right there on the forefront. And you're a graduate of the University of North Texas.
Yes.
Go Mean Green Eagles, so am I. Yay, Mean Green. It's been a long time, though, so 1988. Alex Elfindi. Alex is Bumble's head of brand. And if y'all don't know what Bumble is, it is a dating app. And
it's actually, we started as a dating app, and we've moved into Bumble BFF and Bumble Biz, where we're connecting women for friendship and then business connecting.
Awesome. And so she's in charge of branding and has now become the, let's see, what is your title now?
I'm head of brand.
Head of brand. So we've got, and she really took this company and took it to the next level with her insight and her expertise. So glad to have you all here. So let's just start off with my first question for each of you, very briefly. Explain to me, what has been your greatest challenge as a woman in the workforce, and how did you overcome those challenges? Let's start with you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Rebecca, and thank you to the Texas Tribune. Hooray that we're having our first Women's Symposium. And one of the things that I do every day is I founded a construction company, literally me and one other person, and have grown it to build the largest light rail system in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're at like 18 airports. And so just a lot of hard work in all, as you can guess, in a male-dominated industry. And then 3 years after starting the construction company, I founded a geotech and engineering firm. So I just want to plant that with you so you can see kind of where I live almost every day is around a very strongly male-dominated industry. But I think the biggest challenge is always going to be, and that was the question, right? The biggest challenge. Yeah, the biggest challenge really is to just to know who your audience is, know who your client is, and just to really know about your business. If you know about your business, there's not really much that anyone can say that about you that you don't know what it is that you're doing, basically, as a woman. And I think the comments and the disparity, it's very prevalent. And I've been doing this 18 years. And I will tell you, recently in the last 6 months, a situation happened to me that I was actually shocked that it's still happening to me. And, you know, I do believe that my biggest challenge in what I've done, whether it's in my businesses or on the boards that I serve on, a bank board that I serve on, or the board of Energy Future Holdings that I serve on, no matter what, my challenge has always been to speak for women and to speak for gender equality and to make certain that if I'm in a position where I'm either the CEO of our companies or I'm serving on a large $45 billion corporation board, is to ask the questions about where are our women, what are our programs, how are we promoting women and minorities. So that continues to be, I think, a challenge that all of us have, but it's certainly something that I have a strong, passionate voice about.
Excellent.
Well, I've been an attorney for more than 35 years, and so when I was going to law school, there weren't a lot of women, unlike today where women make up more than half of the law schools. And I think the biggest challenge you have is when you come out into a career field that's dominated by men, you have to work a balance between asserting yourself and standing up for your rights, but also understanding your audience. I deal every day with opposing counsel, judges, and juries. And so while I want to make sure that I assert my rights and I assert my position, I have always felt like you have to be careful, too, to understand what we describe now as implicit bias. People who don't really understand that they're biased against you, so you don't want to offend them, but you want to make them understand that you're equal and you're able to do the job. I talk about when I was a young lawyer, we were very careful in front of juries not to upset them because women were coming into the workplace, and so I always tell the story about I would not wear my wedding rings because, you know, women weren't supposed to be married and work, and so I didn't want to offend anybody because the last thing I wanted to do is cost my client something because of that. Things have changed, and I'm glad it's changed, but as we get more progressive, we still have to understand women in leadership roles is still something that is different, and we have to understand a little bit about the implicit bias. So you have to work yourself into the leadership roles, assert yourself, bring other women up behind you, but understand that often people don't realize they have a bias. And so we want to teach them that we're good leaders, we're good organizers, we can do the job too, so that they'll follow us, and that's what we want.
Vinay?
So I would say the biggest challenge, and thank you once again, Rebecca and CFT and Texas Tribune for having us. But I would say the biggest challenge for me personally was knowing myself and knowing my worth. I think I'm from Dallas, I'm a Dallas native, and I also started in a male-dominated field in the police department. I was a police officer for 8 years. And so just and very young, 22, in the police department, not really knowing who I am at the time. Was not letting anyone else tell me who I was or what I could do or what I couldn't do. And it wasn't until I went to law school while I was while I was a police officer and started my practice and eventually went to the city attorney's office and then eventually to the mayor's office. But it wasn't until after all of that that people were like, you did all that? And for me, I was like, I'm just going day by day. I'm just getting up every morning, taking my son to school, going to work, just trying to get through it, right? But knowing and stepping back and realizing, okay, that was an accomplishment, that we have challenges and you can do it, so don't let anyone else tell you what you can or can't do, because people want to box you in. Right. They want to say if you're married, you can only do this or you can only do that, but not allowing people to do that and stepping outside of my own box and my own mind sometimes to do what I said I wanted to do and doing it.
Right.
I'm so excited to be here. The panel's already amazing. And my challenges have been a bit different. So I'm part of Bumble. We're 80% to 85% women in our company. We were founded by a woman, and she brought on 3 employees to begin the launch of Bumble, which was, I was one of those 3. And right in the very beginning of the company, as we were taking this new concept out there, dating apps had a really bad reputation. Nobody wanted to use them. People were embarrassed to say that they were meeting online. So not only did we have to change the stigma surrounding dating apps and normalize it, but on our platform, women make the first move. We wanted to end the messages on dating apps. Historically, women are inundated with messages from men that usually end up getting very aggressive, intense, and inappropriate immediately. So we started Bumble, where women make the first move. And I remember in the beginning, a lot of men were saying that this was my little gig that I was a part of, which now we've changed that. I think we're at 28 million users later. Wow. We've changed that. And we've also changed the way that women perceive themselves in relationships and their dynamics in relationships. And by putting women in control, we've noticed that we have industry low reports of harassment and abuse online on our platform. So not only in the beginning did we have to change the stigma around dating, we also had to change the way that women view themselves in relationships. And also, as a company led by women, we've handled the business differently. And that's been really exciting, but with that comes a lot of responsibility. And I think that what's interesting being in a male-dominated society, especially in the tech industry, it's making sure that we don't run the business like men. We run the business like women. And what does that look like? And how can we change that? And how do we set a new example for running a company?
That's amazing. So one of the things that I always get asked is, how much do you make? And my answer is always like, not as much as the men in our newsroom, because unfortunately there is still a huge pay disparity when it comes to men and women. I think we're closing the gap. How do we take this to the next level? I mean, is it more women, CEOs, getting more women in power? What is the answer to this such a difficult situation that we've been in for decades? Who wants to go first?
I'll start. I'm also part of an organization called American Association of University Women, AAUW, and we do research on pay equity. It's a group. And we've just started a new project that's called Work Smart and Start Smart, and it's about teaching women to negotiate better. And when you're listening, I've listened to this, women undervalue themselves. And we tend to think if we go into a situation, we'll prove ourselves after the fact and then we'll get the pay. And you know once you start the job, you're not going to get the pay afterwards. So we need to teach women to, and what I mean by value yourself is do the research on the job you're seeking. Not just a new job, but a job within your company. Make sure you understand what you bring to that job, what you have of value, and then take a deep breath and go in there and sell yourself. And men tend to just ask for it. They say, well, I'll ask for this. What can they say? No. Right. They're not going to fire you for asking it. But women tend to hold back, and I think we're trying to teach women to be better about valuing what they bring to the workplace. And that's step one. Now, there's a lot of other issues that have, again, the bias that we have in the workplace and equaling the pay. But I think if we get a little stronger on negotiating what we're worth, we're going to help to close that gap, too.
And I would just add to Malinda's comment that one of the things that we need to do as just a society in general is we really need to pull back the curtains of those organizations that already have salaries published. All it takes is for us as a smart, group of women to go and research and see the disparity. And you mentioned universities, and I think that's a classic example where you've got state government agencies that have to publish their salaries. Mm-hmm. So the data will speak for itself. I have a lot of confidence that when you start running up a flagpole for something that's really critical as this is, just the data is so empowering. And I think even recently, this morning, the teachers that are in protest and have now gone 3 days of protest, and I think one of the individuals, and actually this was just a teacher, it's more about the workforce of teaching, that he had a full-time job, a part-time job, and he's still qualified for food stamps.
Wow.
And you think about that, and so it is, if you're in a leadership role, it is incumbent upon us to say, pull back the curtain, hold the CEOs or the leaders of these public agencies or universities accountable, and to say, look at the disparity amongst your workforce. It's just the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And so that's one of the things that I would add to that, is just the data's there. Mm-hmm. So when you've got data that can back up and support you, I mean, you can't really mess with data, and you can't change it.
That's right.
Do your research.
Yeah, and speaking on, I think that it's so important to be your own advocate, but also our CEO and founder, Whitney Wolfe Herd, she has said over time, over the past 3.5 years, which is not that long for a company to be around, but I think it's actually just 3, but wow. She's always helps us all get raises, and she says that no woman ever asks for a raise, and it's true. We're all just excited and happy to be there, and what I found through her, as she's led by example, it's making sure that the women who work under me are getting the raises, and I think that it's also encouraging young women who are joining the workforce to ask and to make it normal for them to see raises happening, so that they then look forward to it and expect it and ask for it. I mean, it's helping everybody else understand their value too. So that's been something that's been incredible at our company, is the excitement around helping women become more successful.
And I would just echo, coming from the city government side, when I first came to our office, we were getting ready to run again. The mayor was getting ready to run again, so it was a transition team. We were kind of in the transition team. And that was one of the things that I saw, I think, before I was there. A male headed the office before me, and Scott came in, actually. And shout out to Scott over here supporting me. So that's what also you need. You need male supporting us women in the workplace as well. So I appreciate him for doing that. But before we came in, a lot of the females came to me, because there's predominantly females in our office, and they were not getting the pay that they were supposed to get. And this was a city office, and for me, working at the city for so long and coming from the city attorney's office, I'm like, wait a minute, you guys have just been working and not saying anything. And it was fighting for them to get those bump ups and what they needed, because I don't know if they didn't feel comfortable saying it before, or if they're about what was going on, but just like you said, going to them and kind of talking to the other women, because I'm a big advocate that you're not placed here for yourself. You're always placed to help someone else. And so that's the opportunity that I think has to be key in anybody in a leadership position, especially if you're a female.
Yeah, and just playing off of that, one of my little secret weapons was Gloria Campos. She was my mentor when I was in college, and I remember the first time I took my salary to her, she's like, girl, don't take that. That is really low. And so there is an importance of mentorship and having women mentors, and sometimes they say, well, women, we don't work together very well, but it is so critical that, because that's the misnomer, right. You hear that all the time, but what I have found is some of the women that have advocated for me as well have been those mentors. Talk to me about the importance of finding those female mentors.
And I think, just echoing that, it's as a woman in a leadership position, you're there to serve. You're serving not only the company, but you're serving everybody else who's working with you, and I think that it's so important to not only mentor, but advocate for each other. That's interesting because where we are as a company, and I think it would be known as unique, but it really isn't. We don't step on each other as women. We're not competitive with each other. We're competitive to take this company to as far as we can get it, because we feel like until every single woman has the chance to see herself as an equal in a relationship, we're not done. And I think that making sure that as we move forward, every single woman feels empowered at work and in her relationship as well. Because if there's an imbalance there in any way, it's just like you're saying, these women aren't speaking up. There's also a confidence that takes place not only in the workplace but in your personal life, and it's making sure that those are in balance.
And, okay, go ahead.
I would just add on to that too, especially what I've seen from the police department, the city attorney's office, even now where I'm at, is that I think there used to be a culture that there was only so much space for so many women at the top. So I can't like you and I have to fight you because there's only space for so many. They're only going to let 2 of us make it. And I don't want you taking my spot. And so thankfully, I have ran into wonderful women and mentors, even from the police department. I would be on squads where there was all men and I was the only female in the squad. And as soon as I saw another one, we were like, yes, come on, let's work together. And it's been the total opposite. And I think now with the change of culture, thankfully, women are more comfortable around each other. And so that perception is changing. And I would even say, especially in the position that I am in now, and some of these great women are here today, I have met awesome women, and I stand on their shoulders because they have brought me in, because I didn't do politics before this. So politics is another game when you're coming into it, and I'm a realist, so I'll say something crazy in a minute too. So they have protected me, they have wrapped their arms around me and taken care of me and made sure that, okay, be careful with this and just watch where you step and do. And I am so thankful. And we get cocktails and we have to have our little moments and our power. And I wouldn't know what to do without that. So I would say that culture is totally changing, and realizing that businesses like yours and all the, having CEOs like Ms. Acosta, that you don't have to be just one female. There's only room for one of us. That's what's helping it to change.
And 2 things. You need to take time to help others, and that is very important. But you also need to ask for help.
Right.
And women tend to give help, but they don't ask for help. And I'll use my lawyer example again.
So
I tell women all the time, call me if you want to have, need some information. I do employment law, it's a specialty, because men call me all the time that I don't know.
Okay, let's
Can I just
call
say
Malinda. We're all going to be calling Malinda.
I don't care, because you know how long it takes? It takes 2 or 3 minutes for me to talk to you. That's not much of my time. So men reach out when they need help. We tend to go, I don't want to bother her. She's busy. I'm not that busy. Call me. I don't mind.
And then I would just add to Malinda's comment, but by the way, I think that's very generous that you do that and you offer that. I have a different perspective that I'll throw in here, because some of my most favorite mentors in the world have always been women, but they have also been men. And one of my biggest mentors of all, some of you may know him, but Ted Strauss, who's now deceased, but Ted and I would spend Friday afternoon from 2 to 4 at his house, and we talk about my business, we talk about my boys, we talk about politics, and how different our politics were. But more than anything, I do believe that having both sides and finding a good mentor, because he really taught me a lot about, how men in the business world think, and what could help me and how I might change something. And he really did it genuinely from the bottom of his heart. And so I give back through what I have in my office. It's called a whiteboard session. And it just created out of being on the whiteboard and doing something and helping someone. But I will have sessions at my office with a business person or someone who's a young person who's trying to decide. I'm a graduate from Texas Tech, my alma mater, by the way. And I'm not sure. I have a finance degree. Do I go to accounting, PwC, Deloitte? Do I go there? Or do I go equity finance? Or do I go there? And we just whiteboard it and we map it out. And I think the biggest thing is to leave that person with my finance background to be able, to be able to guide them and say, times are changing. banking's changing, finance is changing, equity investments are changing. There's a lot of things changing, but to just give them my perspective as a CEO and also a board member of an oil and gas company and energy and the other things that I do. But it's nice to share that information with them and leave them kind of a roadmap. So they just started calling them whiteboard sessions. So that's how I try to give back, is to understand their needs.
One of the things that one of my professors told me was write down your goals, write down what you want to make. What advice do you give women that want to get to that next level? How important is setting goals and knowing where you want to go next? Who wants to?
I'll start with that. One of the things that will be really important is, to me, simultaneously with goals, Rebecca, is time management. You have to really commit to the time that you're going to need for those goals. And the biggest time of my entire day is the time that I give to myself. So whether it's my meditation or my workouts or stretching or whatever it is, but I really think that goals, anybody can reach any goal. There's a way to do it. I've got goals right now in my mind that I've already mapped out that I'm going to do in the next 10 years. It's going to be different than what I've been doing, but I already know what it is. And so I told myself, okay, this is going to require time management here, to run your companies, to do this, to, everything that I've got. But I think the most important thing is to be real. And people talk about passion and, and I agree that you have to have passion about it. But I also think that it has to be realistic, because one of the things that every entrepreneur, every business is going to need is you're going to need access to capital. And so the first thing that you need to do is, it's kind of like looking back, opening the closet and saying, how's my credit report? Is there anything there I need to fix so that when I need something, I've got it cleaned up? You're just getting ready. So it's like a process. It took me 2 years before I launched my construction company, and I had a really good business plan, and I was a young mother. So I really had to plan it all, buy your house, buy your cars, buy what you need, because when you start this business, you're going to be dead broke at first. So, but it really is, I think, more than anything, it is just being realistic, but have the dreams, but don't forget to sit back and think about what are the things in my life that I need to change to make better.
Yeah, well, I feel like we may need to have a whiteboard session. With all of this for myself, too. But
happy to do it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But I think, too, I'm probably the opposite in terms of, I think that set your goals and then be willing to work the long hours. I mean, I have worked but I think that if you're passionate about something and it really matters to you, like, you will find a way to get it done. And that's where I've sat, is just putting in the tireless hours of work. Because I think there are a lot of people who are talented and have more experience than I do, but I also think that there are so many people on our team. Like, we've hired young women. There's a woman who runs our social media account who came from an auditing background and was not a creative. And I saw something in her that was this excitement and passion and just like out of the box thinking, and now she runs all of our creative on all of our content for social. And I think that there's something to be said for like enthusiasm, passion, and just willingness to go, learn, roll up your sleeves, and put in the hard work.
And you can't overload yourself, because you will spend all your time stressing, making excuses, and feeling like a failure. You've really got to decide how much you can handle. Work hard. I mean, you're going to work long and you can add things, but you've got to reach a point where you have to say no. And we often don't know how to say no, because when you have too much, you're not going to do anything well.
And I would say, I have a lot of friends that are great planners, and I myself used to be a wonderful planner until life happened. But my biggest thing I would say is have no fear. Because what I have found with my life is that I have this wonderful, marvelous plan of what I'm going to do and how it's going to work, and sure enough, detours happen. It's like, roadblock, nope, go this way, you have to go around here. And not to say that it doesn't happen, and it still usually ends up happening if you stay focused, but you just can't fear when things don't, as women, I think, when things don't go exactly the way we planned them, we kind of like, and think maybe it's not for us or not what we're supposed to be doing. But I would just say have no fear, and stay focused, because, you know, our plans don't always go as planned, and I learned that the hard way. So
Yeah, you know, one of my greatest challenges was when I decided to become a mom. And oh my gosh, childcare is like paying for college tuition these days. It's not affordable for a lot of people. Talk to me about companies and what we as women can do more, and men and people that own companies and run companies, for affordable child care, because that is such a huge thing for women in the workforce that want to have that career but need to be able to also afford good care for their kids.
I'm saying, it's kind of my area a little bit. One thing I can say is I know that in Dallas we found that there is a lack of affordable quality childcare. And so for a city, for our city, I know there's going to be a big symposium on this later in April, I believe in Fort Worth, to talk about it statewide as well. So that is a huge issue, and it not only affects us as women, but it affects the workforce. And what middle skilled workers, we've seen the correlation between, here in Dallas, the correlation between middle skilled workers and affordable child care, how some people, and mostly women, will stay home and not enter the workforce because they cannot find that quality child care. Me, myself, I was a single mom for the majority of my child's life, and child care was very huge, but thankfully I live in the city where my family is, so I had a lot of help, so I can't imagine how it would be. But I think that goes, for me, when I think about child care and women in the workplace, I think about pay. It goes back to equal pay. Because even though, for instance, at the city, let's say you make on paper $60,000 a year, once your 13% retirement comes out, and then heaven forbid you have to have medical, right? And so, plus your child, then you're talking about maybe what, $150 per check. And especially if you're a single mom, you're only bringing home closer to $30,000, $38,000 maybe. And now you have to throw some child care on top of that. What does that really look like? So I really applaud a lot of companies that go the route of providing child care or some type of stipend for child care. And things like that. That's one of the things I think at the city we could definitely do a better job at, is how we address child care issues. And I think having more women in leadership like we have now will get there, even for our employees, that our leadership realizes that sometimes poverty starts right here at City Hall. You don't even have to leave the walls. Our employees are victims of poverty just because you're getting paid $40,000 plus. If you have one child, don't throw two on top. You're struggling. So I think just thinking about those things when it comes to pay, even, that it just totally changed it for me.
And it's always interesting to me how even today we put this as a woman's issue.
Right.
I think we got fathers.
Well, that's true.
And these children are our next generation. It's
Absolutely.
a society's problem.
Yeah.
And yet we say, well, this woman has to sacrifice so, you know, she can take care of the child. And I think we need to force the issue a little stronger, that this is not just about the mother, this is about the father, this is about society. And businesses could go a long way to building morale if they would help with this issue of child care, because you're losing a lot of great workers if they have to make a choice between their child or their job, because we know what they're going to choose.
So I guess in my case, because the majority of my employees are male, although I have lots of great women that work for me, I don't believe, I might have one or two of our 200 plus employees that have younger children. But so what I instituted early on was that if you're a parent, whether you're male or female, and your child has a program at school, or you need to pick them up because they're sick, that is a priority for me. Your family is a priority. Do not miss your child's Cub Scout meeting. Do not miss any of that you will never be able to get back in life. You're going to miss those precious moments. So, and there's no penalty at my office if you leave. There's no pay deduction, or, we're going to pay you for the time that you were gone. And so I just think that it's important when a leader exemplifies and talks about how important family is. And when I started my business, my boys were 2 and 4, and I remember that that was really why I started it, because I wanted to be with my kids whenever I wanted to be with my kids. And so I literally would wake up at 4 a.m., drive to the job site, meet my guys, sometimes backhoe in the back of my truck, I mean, whatever it took, okay? And I would make sure that I would be back home by 7 o'clock in the morning so that I could wake them up. They never saw Mom was gone. Of course, Dad was there with them, but I woke them up, I took them to school, I made breakfast, and then if I needed to spend some time that day at school, I would. And then I would make sure and get home, by 3:30 or 4 or 5. So I think there's a difference when you say, there's this thing about working long hours. I think that you have to do that when you first start off, especially, but manage it, manage it to where you've got the other parts of your life, because at the end of the day, your inner, true, most happiness is going to come from those areas, from your kids, from your parents, from your siblings. So don't miss out on that. And so that's my philosophy. Anybody knows at my office, at our companies, that if your child is sick, please, feel free to stay home. I mean, there's nothing like that. And I do have one particular admin that I think requested, could she come in later and start? Absolutely. So I'm very flexible with that.
Wow, you sound like it's utopia over there. Do you have any PR positions?
Well, I think because I grew up in
awesome.
such a big family and great parents that I just want no regrets for the people that work for me,
Because you miss out on those moments. They're gone forever. That's right. And I can't tell you how many, baseball games and other things that I've missed out. Did you want to add to that?
I mean, we have moms on our team. Our company is very young. For a while, for the first, 2 and almost 2.5 years, I was the oldest person on our team in the offices.
Ooh.
So now we have hired on employees who are mothers. Our COO is actually a mom. She has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and it's making sure that people have flexible hours and making sure that they have time to go be with their kids. It's exactly as you were saying. We also have a nursing room for young moms, so they can come into the office and not feel like that takes away from work or just their ability to feel comfortable at work. And we also have, obviously maternity, but paternity leave as well.
Right.
So making sure that we are encouraging fathers to go be with their kids too. So I think it's just an understanding. And what I found, particularly with our COO, it's like if she needs to go, the hours, mothers figure it out. They make up the time. You don't need to make sure that they're clocked in at a certain time if they have children, because they're going to. Women work hard, and that's just it. Like if you're able to, and if you're able to feel like you're supported by your company to be a mom as well, you're gonna put in the time.
Yep. That's right.
So, and that's just, I think that's the way that women are in general.
I love that. It's so encouraging to see that times are changing when it comes to this. It's awesome that they're looking at different things that we can do in the workforce to make it better for people to be happy. Because a happy employee is a better employee, right? If you're miserable all the time,
it's so funny.
You don't get as much productivity out of someone.
It's true, and when the kids are sick, we always want them to come into the office too, so we can I've answered emails with a baby in my lap. It's just, I think that it provides morale and excitement, and there was a week this summer where one of the girls on my team brought her son. He's 8. He came into the office and had an experience at summer camp. So we were like, just bring him to the office, and he hung out with us the whole time and was drawing everywhere on the walls. And it's just making sure that the environment feels family friendly.
That's awesome. Okay, except I'd have to drag my poor son to a crime scene or something. So.
You can drop him off with us, Rebecca.
I don't know about that. Okay, so we're going to open this up for the audience for questions, because I know that a lot of you have questions for these amazing panelists. So let's start right there.
I really appreciate this conversation about child care in the workplace, but I feel like what was a little bit missed in the conversation is the people who really struggle with child care are those people who work at much lower level jobs than y'all are talking about. People who work at McDonald's and are struggling to make ends meet, like really struggling to make ends meet, who work shift work or work as waitresses at night, minimum wage jobs or barely above minimum wage jobs that don't have all these great benefits that y'all are speaking of. Where do you see that? Where does that fit into this conversation? Because that's really what's missing in quality child care.
And her question was, what about women who work in places that are minimum wage or just barely above that? And that's the problem with minimum wage. There is no way that you're going to work that level of a job and be able to afford child care. And so I think as a society we need to look at that and realize that we do need to raise that lower level, because otherwise those women aren't going to be in the workplace, because figure child care and divide it by $7 and it's not working out. So you're right, but again, I think that's a problem that we all face as a society, that we have to look at that working level and say, do we really think that $7.85 an hour is something that in this society we should be allowing? And we need to look at minimum wage at least.
And I would just add on to that, because I'm sure some of you all are advocates in the room. Think about most of the people who should be able to qualify for assistance for their child care at that level if they're making minimum wage. But the issue is, we in Dallas, I know, do not receive enough funding, so there is a gap. So even though we, I think, I should have this number memorized, but it's in the $2 million range that we get for certificates just for our workforce to allow for child care. Even with that, we're also having to guarantee any child that's put into CPS system or things like that, that has to be taken out of that. So how many working parents are we really allowed to assist with, child care? So even from that standpoint too, from a statewide standpoint.
Hi, thank you all for being here today. Dallas Fed says we're at 3.9% unemployment right now. So almost everybody that can work is working, and we can't afford to have nobody that is tied up with daycare or anything else not able to be in the workforce. So I think employers, I think the state, I think this year in elections, that should be one of the absolute topics that go to the heart of everything we're doing. We need everybody to be working that wants to work, and this is the way we can do it. Cheap money. This is cheap money to help people, not big expensive projects. This is the cheapest money we could possibly put out there, is to establish some better healthcare, better daycare for everybody and stuff. So let's hope that's one of the ballot topics.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You had a question also?
First of all,
Oh, okay. I think they're getting a microphone here.
First of all, thank you all. This was a really great panel. My question is mostly for Alex. So being my age and demographic, I'm quite familiar with Bumble. And I do appreciate its approach. I wasn't familiar with Bumble Biz, and with Bumble being a female-led business, and you said operates with female and women in mind, I'd like to learn more about Bumble Biz and how that philosophy works into that operation.
Yeah,
I'm not a plant. I don't work for Bumble.
I was about to ask you if you've ever used Bumble.
Yes.
You have? Awesome. Okay. I hope you've had a good experience on it. Bumble Biz. So back in March of 2016, we launched Bumble BFF. That was something that our users were asking for. We were hearing a lot that they wish there was a way for to find a dating app to find friends. So women match with women, men match with men. We facilitate friendships. That turned into a really positive support network for women. And then Bumble Biz was something that we launched this past October. And the idea behind Bumble Biz is that we wanted to create equality in introductions, right? That's what Bumble is about. We're an introductions platform, and we're the inverse, essentially, of a Facebook where you connect with people that you know. Bumble is normalizing meeting strangers. And on Bumble Biz, the idea was to create an environment where women and men could match with each other and network professionally. And right as it started to launch, we actually started to see an influx of people who were reporting that on other online dating platforms, women were getting inappropriate messages from men in networking. And so on Bumble Biz, women make the first move as well, because we want it to feel like as you're going out and networking professionally, you know that you're there to talk business, not as as a cheap way to get into a date or as a cheap way to take you out and figure out, take a coffee date and make it inappropriate. We wanted it to feel like a safe environment. So it really is. It's not something. It's not right now. It's not really optimized for headhunters, or it's more of an open-minded way of networking. So if you log on to Bumble Biz, which by the way, if you're married or in a relationship in this room, you can actually, sounds like such a plug, but it is you can hide dating on Bumble, so you can actually, there's a timestamp so that you don't have to have dating on your phone when you download Bumble. It's just, you'll have Bumble BFF and Bumble Biz. And on Bumble Biz, it's more of open-minded networking. And this is very new age, but we find that people typically, like, you have an idea of what, that's what we were saying, goal-oriented. Like, you have an idea of what you want to do with your future, what you want to do with your career, but a lot of times it's a random job opportunity that ends up changing your life or changing the course of your career trajectory. And so we find that just by networking with people, it creates more opportunities for you to have more options.
We have a question way in the back of the room over there.
Good morning, thank you. Have a question for you. So these shared workspaces are really, really popular, but all of y'all are in like, you know, 9-to-5 environments where you see the same people day in and day out. How is the shared work environment going to shape the future? Is there any studies on this? I mean, I don't know if I'm just, you know, creating a question, but I'm very curious because, you know, they seem to be very popular, but I feel like interacting with people on a day-to-day basis kind of helps us really kind of grow over those challenges and those, you know, things that come up, the office politics and what have you. So I'm curious.
Well, I would respond to that. In our industry, we use a lot of technology. I mean, all of you use live. In fact, we're live today. But I think that the opportunities for the flexibility and having workers who work at home, or I mean, one of my principal employees lives in Austin. You know, so I really think that you have to really acknowledge that times have changed, and you know, if you have an employee that's going to be key to you, that you want them to keep working, they've had a change in their home and their lifestyle that requires them to now be working or moving, that is absolutely no longer a reason why somebody leaves your company. So I really want to say that's what I see in a lot of industries, that people can work from home or people can work remotely from another place. Now, the shared space aspect, I think I have a bigger size company, so I've got to keep certain things in my office so that I can get to it and deal with it. But I do believe that at some point it's probably going to be big in our industry. It isn't yet, but technology is, to your point, the way that people can work from home or a coffee shop or whatever. And to us, it doesn't really matter where you are. We just need to talk to you and get your report, and let's get going. So I hope that helped.
There's a question right over here.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from Abilene, Taylor County.
All right.
We've consistently been the most conservative county. I know in the 2016 presidential election we were the most conservative county, and I'm running for Abilene City Council. I'm 26 years old, and I've had, thank you. I've had my first conversation was with the local. I met with the party leaders, and had the typical sit downs and the coffees and things. And our local Democratic Party leader, she told me, she said, Abilene City Council is nonpartisan. You do not have to declare a party. You haven't yet, don't. And a lot of these things that we're talking about, these initiatives and these societal problems, are going to take a huge push. I mean, really a huge change in society to accomplish some of these things. And though they shouldn't be partisan, they end up very much being partisan issues a lot of times. So I would like your perspectives on what does it take? Is it pushing? Is it pushing? Is it being patient? What is your perspective on what it takes to be someone who's really, we talked about mentorship. There's not a lot of people, around my area that I would gain from being a mentor. So what is your perspective on what you do going forward and how you run that race?
Well, what I would say, and I was telling somebody, I'm talking in the lobby, Texas primarily is a red state, but Dallas is a blue county. And my mayor is a Democrat. He's very bold about it, that he's a Democrat. But he has been able to, because Dallas has a lot of Republicans here as well, very conservative and in their views, but he's been able to talk on both sides of the aisle. And his big thing, and I follow this 110%, I think he's absolutely right at this, is that you always address the issue. He never starts a conversation with, well, this is what's happening federally, this is what's happening in the state. When we're local, it's just, this is what's happening in Dallas. And do you want to help us in Dallas? For instance, Right now we're tackling a big issue that could be very political around teenage pregnancy, right? Because we all have ways of, you know, the Democrats feel one way of how to address teenage pregnancy and the Republicans feel another way of how, but what we did is we just brought everybody that plays a part in that situation from whatever end into the room and said, Dallas has a problem with teenage pregnancy. How are we going to solve it? And it's not so much, we're not telling people what to do, but can we at least agree that it's a problem and that we want to solve it? And what's happened out of that, and it's going to get bigger, but it's like, oh, it's on my radar now. And even in whatever way they feel like it should be addressed, they're looking at it, it's important, and same thing he did with Southern Dallas. You know, there are a lot of people that don't feel, you know, they say positives and negatives about the GrowSouth movement. But the issue wasn't, you know, how do we fix Southern Dallas, if you want to say that. It's more so, should we? And everybody agrees we need to work in Southern Dallas. And over the last 7 years, we've seen the movement because Southern Dallas is important to Dallas. And we're not a whole city if we're two cities. So just those big unifying messages is which would be my advice, is always stick to the issue that's locally affecting your city. And then don't let the big things come into it. Just how is it affecting Abilene? What's going on in Abilene and how do we make it better? That's what I would say.
And I would add to Vanna, because I grew up in a small West Texas town, and I love Abilene and I love Taylor County. But I do think if you're in that situation where you're getting ready to run or you're running for city council, one of the best ideas I would recommend is to create a kitchen cabinet around you of leaders that can speak for you about you when you're not there. So you want to make a good mix of demographics of gender, age, et cetera, industries, and ask them, will you serve as my counsel? And a kitchen cabinet is not something that you announce in the paper. It's just something that you do. But I think that will help you because you're going to be so busy running in so many different directions to tackle, as Vanna said, the really key issues. So having a kitchen cabinet of about 6 people or however big you want it, shouldn't be that big, but just that will speak how great you are, what a great job you're doing, and you're not even in the room, and they can also teach you what they're hearing out in the community and how to empower you. So that's another piece of advice I give.
And I'm sorry, and that goes to something I forgot to say. Don't be afraid of true diversity. And I know some of us, we have our own beliefs, and we, as we're talking about women in the workplace, I love that Acosta brought up that she also has men that are mentor. We can't just say, oh, just our bubble and only us, nobody else, right? Only people that think like me, but make sure your kitchen cabinet has somebody on there that thinks maybe the opposite or like the other, but that you trust, that you have a good personal relationship with, because we can't be afraid of true diversity.
We have time for a couple more quick questions.
Oh, Alex.
I was also going to say, you were talking about how hard it is to find a mentor in your area. Reach outside of your area and be relentless about finding somebody. I mean, cold email. It's like we were saying, most women don't pick up the phone and call. Call. Like there's nothing wrong with calling or emailing and emailing a couple times. Like just follow up and be relentless about finding those people. If you need people who are your mentors, actively seek them.
Right.
Are we out of time? Or one more question.
This one.
I work with teens a lot and also younger children.
She's going to come bring you the microphone because I don't think they can hear in the back. There we go.
I work with, is this on?
Yes. It's on.
I don't think it's, okay. I work with teens a lot and also younger children, mainly because I was a single parent back in the 70s when it wasn't easy to find child care and I wasn't around family a lot. So it was kind of a nightmare situation. So I try to ease parents and give them a little respite and do things with the kids. But one thing I find is lacking in the communities is enough activities for teenagers after school. And that's a hard time for parents because you can't get babysitters in for teenagers. And most grandparents now are still working. So there's that lack of supervision for teenagers at the time they need it the most. So we need more activities for teens. And one thing I'm thinking about that businesses can help if they have an apprenticeship program where teens can come in and learn about businesses. And for the person that mentioned the low wage earners,
that's especially important because a lot of those kids have never been exposed to the business world. They only know manual labor from their parents. And the parents are working, if both of them are there, they're both working, or one parent is working 2 jobs. So this is a real blank right now, and a lot of the problems I think that we're having with teenagers is because they need new experiences, they need more adventures, and that's not being provided for them in our communities. And I find the cities are very, especially in the suburbs, are very reluctant to address that issue. The kids don't have transportation to get to places, and no one wants to provide the transportation for them. That's the biggest problem.
Thank you.
Well, I know in Dallas we have the Mayor's Intern Fellows Program, which doesn't speak to the after school, which I think you're absolutely right, but during the summer we allow those opportunities for inner city youth to work downtown or in businesses or in nonprofits. CFT actually hosts a few of them every year to give them those, like you said, some of our parents, they only see their parents going to those minimum wage jobs and never get to go downtown. And we have story after story of kids that, it'll bring you to tears, that, hey, this was their first time someone in their family actually left West Dallas or North Dallas to go to a job in the big building downtown and things like that. But I think you're absolutely right. We wish we could do more.
Oh, we got to go to the next panel, they're saying. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. They were amazing. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Hi. I apologize. I'm going to ask this anyway because no one's asked it. Good morning. So all of you are wonderful and strong leaders. However, what I did notice is there are no teachers on the panel, and I think all teachers are leaders. With that said, I wrote 2 questions down that are like, I think important that we should always ask, which is, education reform is slow to non-existent because education is a feminist issue. Knowing that we are in a patriarchal society, I stammer, so I'm gonna keep going. I know that with principals and superintendents, they all look and sound the same. So like, despite the educational workforce being dominantly female, including myself, I'm a teacher, what does it say when the panel before me also doesn't have an educator, a teacher speaking on behalf of teachers? Furthermore, being in a patriarchal society, we women are products of this society. So like, one of the drawbacks of playing into axioms and social constructs is that labels get in the way of progress. So like, knowing that equanimity is the key to peace and success, how do you reconcile the masculine and feminine like things that we have as women? And particularly when you're in hostile spaces of tradition, convention, and propriety, because all of those things are keeping my kids from being like seen as people. And with that said, I see the panel, and none of you are educators, so.
Well, I told you that I was part of an organization called AAUW, and I'm not an educator, but education is a big part of what we push forward, because with education comes equity. And you are absolutely right. When I used to talk to a lot of my groups, I'd say, did you ever face discrimination? And many of them have been teachers. And they would say, no, no, no. And I said, well, predominantly women were the teachers, but the principal was always the coach, and he was always the man. And superintendents tend to be more men. So you're right. That is a huge part of our society that is dominated by women, but yet the leadership opportunities aren't as strong for women. So I agree, and I'm sorry we didn't have somebody of everything, but education is very, very important. And when I was listening to after-school programs, I mean, we have these beautiful schools and buildings, and we close them at 5 o'clock because we don't have enough money. I'm not telling you that but we could be using those for after-school and preschool and empty schools that we could be using, and we don't put the money into education. And we treat our teachers like they're unimportant because we don't pay them like we pay lawyers. But what she does is way more important, I think, than what I do, because she's teaching our children. And you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry that we didn't address that.